And those are hard to put a finger on sometimes. And we might not be able to change them without appealing to a formless realm. And so the talisman writing and the incantation, in a sense, is the language that we use to communicate with that unseen, mysterious aspect to reality.
I'm Michael Max, and this is Qiological, the podcast that curates East Asian medicine and methods through the power of conversation. Acupuncture is strange. Think about it for a moment. A few thin needles inserted in places nowhere near the problem the patient wants to see changed. A method, methods really, that have somehow managed to wind their way down through history to you. Ways of working that other doctors found helpful enough that it provided them a living, and they found it worthwhile enough to pass on. Strange when you think about it that there are methods, so many of them, all capable of getting results good enough that the work is worth doing. I know that I've at times in my career leaned on fetishizing the historical aspect of acupuncture. There was a comfort in feeling like I was part of something that spanned centuries, continents, and cultures. I imagined it gave an authority to my work that in truth I had not yet earned. It takes time to learn to do acupuncture in a way that it's reliably helpful to others. Daunting if you sit down and think about it. Most trades and skills can be learned through a dedicated course of study. Acupuncture, getting your license means that you now have a learner's permit. Of course, this is not a great way to market the profession to someone who's considering it as a career. I understand the appeal of getting out of school and being able to walk into a job with benefits, vacation days, and matching retirement funding. Knowing that it will take another 5 years to begin to feel some confidence, that's a hard sell. And here's the other thing. Which kind of acupuncture is the best? While in this modern moment, we must all walk through the door of TCM, very few people I know practice textbook acupuncture. And yet, because of the infrastructure of the profession, because that is what's going to be on the exam that determines if you get a license or not, that's what we learn. But again, the methods, there are many, and they're interesting. They will develop your senses in unexpected ways, open your thought process in ways of perceiving the world that will surprise you. What's more, it will give you the capacity to help with those strange thin needles that are so emblematic of the art. As a friend of mine often likes to remind me, East Asian medicine, it's not completely rational. If you spent any time at all in the trade, you'll know that this is true. How else can you explain that acupuncture methods that look nothing like each other both can help people? My Western flowchart objective science mind wants to shake its head and walk away. It's just so fantastically subjective. It's the opposite of changing a flat tire, setting a broken bone, or wiring a house for electricity. I could wax poetic about acupuncture being an art, but that would also not do it justice because there is a structure to the different methods. Just that the structure for each is different. Each charts a different landscape and terrain that once you're familiar with, you'll be able to skillfully and effectively intervene. But you have to know the territory of the method. And not unlike learning a language, it's vital to grasp the fundamentals and gain a fluent familiarity with its internal workings. Which brings me, and maybe you, to the question, which method is the best? After all, who doesn't want to be on the winning team? I suspect at this point, the best method is the one that you understand and know how to use. It's the one that helps you to parse a patient's concerns into something that's understandable, that you can see both how a problem came to be and how to skillfully intervene to change the trajectory of that issue. But learning acupuncture is not like learning to be a mechanic or an electrician or an ad copywriter or government bureaucrat. It requires puzzling through whatever method it is that you're looking to learn. It's not a skill that you can buy off the shelf. You must craft it out of your clinical experience. It requires the capacity to hold solidly to certain principles and to hold loosely their application. One of the curious things about learning a system of acupuncture is that, like learning another language or living for an extended time in a foreign country, it will change you. Your senses recalibrate. Your nervous system wires up a new cognitive model. It's not that you gain extrasensory perception, but more that your senses attune to the terrain of that method. Acupuncture, it's more like evolutionary biology than electrical engineering, especially in the world of healthcare, which is rooted in the consistency generated from reliable peer-reviewed science. Acupuncture, it doesn't neatly fit into that box, which at times makes me question its validity. Wonder if I'm just engaged in some well-crafted hocus placebo pocus, and there's plenty of research that shows it could indeed be the case, but often enough, the results are stunningly effective. Not always, but often enough, it helps patients where other methods don't. And so it keeps me in the game. I'm as curious now about how acupuncture works as I was when I first ventured into the inquiry of how does this stuff work. Some questions, they just don't diminish over time. Practice of medicine, it's a strange business. Part biomechanical, part psychoemotive, part something that's resistant to even being named. For sure, people come to us looking for answers. But in some ways, our work requires holding on to potent and not so easily answered questions. Such is our work here in Between Heaven and Earth. In this conversation with Lindsey Wei, we explored Daoist medicine, the structure of a world that resonates and responds to unseen forces and processes, and furthermore, how to interact and intercede for the benefit of our patients. We'll get into this in just a moment. Stay with us. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. It's Women's Health Month at Mayway Herbs. Check out their new website for learning resources on helping women with herbal medicine. Are you a creature of habit? How about making a change that helps your patients and the planet with AccuFast needles? And later in the show, raising your fees doesn't have to be a difficult process. Jane has helpful suggestions on making it easy and effective. And finally, have you considered that having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things that you can do? Julie Bear Don't Walk has, and she can help you do something about it too. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Qiological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more.
Hi folks, I'm Yvonne Lyle, president of Lindsey Wei Herbs. May is Women's Health Month, and as a women-owned and women-run business, we especially love how Chinese medicine can support wellness through every stage of a woman's life. So in this month's newsletter and podcast, we're covering topics like PMS, pregnancy, menopause, and osteoporosis. We'll share expert insights and effective treatment strategies you can put to good use in your clinic. Our Plumflower brand line includes herbal tea pills, tablets, extract granules, and organic herbs, all of which you can find on mayway.com. And where you can also find articles, videos, and other resources to support your practice. Since 1969, Lindsey has been a trusted source for high-quality herbal products. In these challenging times, please know that we remain committed to keeping our products accessible and affordable so you can take care of yourself and your patients. As always, thank you for supporting Real Chinese Medicine.
Daily habits and routines feel comforting, familiar, easy, automatic. That's the power of repetition. You've worked out the kinks and can do it with your eyes closed. But what if you shook things up? What if you ditched the old routine and tried something new? Hi, I'm John Sten. I've practiced acupuncture for over 30 years, and together with my wife Kelly, we created the world's first eco-friendly acupuncture needle. The AcuFast earth-friendly needle system cuts your packaging waste by 60 to 90%, depending upon your needle type, speeds up your needling, gives you more control, and best of all, while you're healing patients, we plant a tree for every 2 boxes your clinic uses. Thousands of acupuncturists have already made the switch. In just the last year, they've helped plant over 16,000 trees. Since we started, that number has grown to over 50,000. So break the routine. Be the change. Visit acufastneedles.com. Your patients and the planet will thank you.
Lindsey Wei, welcome to Qigong.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here.
You are. What are you excited about?
I'm just excited to see what we get into talking about with only the prompt of Taoism and medicine and the relationship to what I do for a living. I have been just writing and thinking a lot about it, and turns out I have a lot to say about it. So we'll see what happens.
I am really looking forward to that. And the reason I'm looking forward to it is because I often hear people in the Chinese medicine community say, well, Chinese medicine is Daoist medicine. And I'm not a historian, and I'm not a Taoist, and I've watched how our profession, and I've done it myself, will glom onto something in history because, it's kind of cool, and it kind of connects, maybe, but I don't know if it's really true, and if it is true, in what way is it true, and how might that be helpful for us? So I know it's a big question to jump in on right away, but there it is, fastball down the center.
Yeah, let's go for it. So I think that the reason why the two trajectories are interrelated, Taoist medicine and traditional Chinese medicine, or like American Chinese medicine, modern version of Chinese medicine.
Hang on a second. I just got to say this. You're the first person I've ever heard say American Chinese medicine. That's very refreshing to hear. And I think you're right. There's a whole stream of medicine that is American Chinese medicine. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, I mean, that is interesting. I think, there's so many different branches of Chinese medicine, right? And when I say American Chinese medicine, I mean the way that we see it applied in America, where we're inevitably merging a little bit of Western medicine with Chinese medicine. And so I think that what Taoist medicine really is when we add back in the ritual components, specifically talisman writing and incantation. And when the medicine doesn't have those components, I consider it traditional Chinese medicine.
Okay. So the Taoist aspect of Chinese medicine is the incantation and the talisman writing.
Yeah, I think very generally so. And it has, again, throughout the dynasties in China, been either present in the medicine or not as present, those Daoist components. And I think even to modern day, we have both in China. We have the modern version of traditional Chinese medicine as it exists today, with a blend of Western medical science. And then we still in China still see Juyo talisman writing and incantation healings, ritual healings by Daoists, typically Daoist renunciants, but also, at-home practitioners of Daoism.
Okay. I remember briefly, I was attempting to study with a guy who did Dongshi acupuncture in Taiwan. I heard about him. And I remember going to go and hang out a bit at his clinic, and he was doing that. And I have to tell you, it flipped me out. I didn't know how to make sense, and partly because I didn't know how to make sense of it, and partly because I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm hoping I can learn something maybe not available in the States that I could bring back with me. But I just didn't know how I was going to bring that back.
What was the part that felt astonishing?
It was I just could not wrap my mind around, writing, burning. The whole thing just seemed too weird to me. I'm a Western kid. I'm a guy from the Midwest, right? I'm in Asia, and I'm trying to learn some Chinese and trying to learn some medicine. And it was too far afield for me. I couldn't take advantage of it.
Yeah. And I think that's understandable. It's not mainstream and it's not for everyone. And that's okay. I think a lot of the time when this type of ritual healing comes into play is when other things haven't worked.
So I'm delighted to be able to sit down with you today and go over this again, have another shot at perhaps understanding. So help me grasp, and ideally help me grasp with my Chinese medicine mind, what's going on here with these kinds of practices.
Right. So I think that Taoist medicine is based on a worldview that there are mysterious causes for ailments that can't necessarily be seen clearly. And it's in those cases that we would appeal to this, let's say, mysterious realm. We call it the celestial realm, or to the pantheon of deities to assist in the healing, which has a mysterious factor. We're not really sure what the cause is, right? And I think in a Taoist medicine worldview, we include potential causes to be such things as karma and destiny, or we could refer to that as ganying, or action and reaction, or how we think, what our emotions and actions in the world are, what the environment that we live in is. These would all be considered potential causes. And those are hard to put a finger on sometimes. And we might not be able to change them without appealing to a formless realm. And so the talisman writing and the incantation, in a sense, is the language that we use to communicate with that unseen, mysterious aspect to reality. So I think someone has to be at least open to that is a potential part of our existence, to be interested in it. Or they're so sick and have found no cure that they become open to trying anything.
For sure, illness, especially the more curious illnesses, or the things that are very complex, or very, very entangled. Like you're saying, there's the emotional aspects, there's cultural aspects, there's karmic things that we bring in, there's our own bad habits and I would say illusion and delusion that we carry around that can also contribute to this. So for sure, using simply the rational mind to understand things, it's got its place, but you're not going to get everything with it, right? That net's only going to catch certain fish.
With the history of Taoist medicine, we're not only thinking about the rational mind, actually. We're including that other mysterious, inexplainable piece as part of the worldview.
How is it that this talisman process, how does it create this communication? I mean, I suspect there's kind of a mechanism here. I mean, that might not be the right way to describe it, but you use the term gonging, which is kind of a call and response, right? There's a resonance. You do something and it like sends out a vibration, right? And the things that are associated with it will kind of light up. Gonging is a really interesting term. You know, we use it a lot in our medicine with everything from looking at microsystems on the body and choosing points based on that to using certain herbs, or in this case, some Daoist medicine. What's going on here with this talisman process? Because it sounds like a science and an art in a way.
It really is. It's a fascinating science and art and ritual devotional activity. It's not something that someone can just look at the pictograph, the talisman, replicate it, and have efficacy. It's something that you have to, first of all, establish that there's a communication with the Taoist pantheon. And that's typically established through creating a Taoist altar as a communication device. There is a certain amount of, as I said, faith and devotion involved in that, and a history of practicing what those ritual arts are. So the practitioner has developed this over time, this relationship with what it is like to communicate with another dimensional frequency, and then has spent periods of time of abstentions. We typically do like a 49-day period of empowering a specific talisman, for example, or an incantation, same method. So much so, you've practiced it so many times throughout that 49-day period or 100-day period that it has become more and more condensed and embedded inside of you, inside of your being, to the point where that energetic, that design of the talisman or the vocal incantation is inside of you. And at that point, you drawing it is just an external manifestation of what's happening, but that energetic and frequency is already embedded inside of you, so much so that it can just as if come out through your eyes. And this process of memorizing and the vocalization for incantation, for example, I mean, it really truly does embed into the tissues. So we memorize something, say it again and again, compress it to the point where we could say it almost in just one breath or murmur. And so that distillation process is like this process of pulling and drawing a type of light or brilliance and empowering it. And then that becomes the medicine. So just like instead of using an herb, or herbs and mots are a great example, because that's something that has in the wild gained nutrient from the sun and from the earth and from the moon. And that has then condensed into the properties of that herb. And then that becomes a medicine. And so with talisman writing or incantation, it's like the human is going through that process of receiving the light from the sun, the nutrients from the earth, and condensing that into the medicinal properties that manifest then in either the incantation or the drawing.
So you're talking about these, I love your phrase, another dimensional frequency or other dimensional frequencies. And it intuitively sounds right. I'm like, oh, yeah, right. That makes sense. What you're doing, and you can see these as pantheon. Love that image of pantheon as well. Because there's these different energies that have a kind of being. When I was a kid, I must have read the Greek mythology. I don't know how many times I read it, because I would read it and it'd be like, oh, that's so good. And I could like feel into the different characters, be them, because of course they're aspects of us. And I get done reading them and I go back and I read it again. I like read it again and again and again. Sounds like that's what you're doing when you're condensing something. You're saying it over and over so that it's not just an idea. It's not just a story. It's an energy. And there's a part of you that now, because you have a personal relationship with it, you can do something with that energy.
Absolutely. I agree. Mythology is something that has always existed in the human psyche from the beginning of humanity. It gives us a certain sense of aliveness that feels intrinsic, like a birthright. And these frequencies or archetypes or story myths, there's a way in which the human mind and human imagination can co-evolve with those and interact with those mythologies, or in this case, if a deity is a certain frequency. And really, in a Daoist worldview, this mythology is interrelated to the celestial realm. Is actually like the starry sky, the planets, the stars. All of the deities have an astral component to them.
So when you're talking about celestial, I mean, this is what you call heaven, like the Tian of Tiandiran.
Exactly. Yes. Heaven, I'm using interchangeably with the term celestial, Tian, Diren. Yeah. Heaven, earth, and human. And that harmony. And so if human is not in relationality with heaven, then there's a loss in that harmony between the three. So I'd say Taoist medicine essentially includes heaven in it, whereas TCM, maybe there's not quite the languaging or place for that because it's has to be standardized,
Yeah. I mean, we talk about it. It's a very common phrase that gets used. I think it's in all the textbooks. But whether we're actually using it that way, that's a whole different story. And what I hear you saying is there are these other sort of intelligences, these other sort of beings in that celestial realm, and we can lean on them. So who's some of the pantheon?
To start from the beginning, well, we always talk about the void or the origin, and that would, sort of be, that pulse of the Tao, driving force behind life. And emanating out from that void, the first deities in the pantheon are considered to be pre-heaven, so they're not manifest on earth necessarily. They're those primordial manifestations of the Tao, and those we refer to as the San Qing, or the San Bao Tianzuan, the three treasure gods, who then did become anthropomorphized into human form so that we can better communicate and relate to them. But that would be Yuan Shi Tianzuan, Ling Bao Tianzuan, and Dao De Tianzuan. Those are typically considered the highest deities in the pantheon, and they're so primordial that they're really not human, but they are the Tao, the scriptures, and the teachings is another way of describing them. And the teachings part, Dao De Tianzuan, further manifested as a deity called Taishang Lao Zhen, who we know as the avatar of Lao Tzu. So Lao Tzu is like the ultimate teacher on earth of the Tao. And Taishang Lao Zhen had various manifestations. And so some of the other manifestations people consider as avatars of Taishang Lao Zhen are Guanyin, the Bodhisattva of compassion, as well as Xuanwu or Zhanwu, which is the patron deity of the Wudang Mountains. So the true warrior, who's also related to the turtle snake.
Dark warrior.
Yeah, who at one point was a theriomorphic deity of the turtle and snake, which again was originally a grouping of constellations in the northern quadrant of the sky. And we also have Shi Wangmu, the Queen Mother of the West, and Donghua Dijun, the Lord of the Eastern Fluorescence, planetary deities.
Are these all coming out of Taishang Lao Tzu? Or are these coming out of different energies?
Not all of them. Just of the ones I named, Guanyin and Zhanwu are thought to be avatars of Taishang Lao Zhen.
That's interesting because one is this like very beneficent sort of healing influence, and the other is this like dark warrior influence. So this is this like a yin yang pairing like we're so used to seeing?
I I don't think that it's necessarily, I would say Shi Wang Mu and Donghua Dijun, the Queen Mother of the West and the Lord of Eastern Fluorescence, are more of a yin-yang pair because they're like this east-west polarity. But Guanyin and Zhenwu aren't necessarily related in that way. But it is, I think, important to see those two aspects of grand compassion as well as this kind of ferocity protector energy. In Guanyin with the compassion and Zhenwu with that protective exorcistic energy.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that honestly just makes running a practice easier. Let's dive into something that's never easy, but sometimes necessary: raising your fees. It can feel awkward, right? But here's a tip that can really help. Consider offering flexibility to your patients as you introduce the change. When patients face new fees, it's natural for them to feel uncertain or concerned. That's where flexibility can really make a difference. Offering options like a phased increase, suggesting a payment plan, or even taking a moment to talk things through can help to ease the transition. These thoughtful gestures show your patients that you're listening and care about them, which strengthens the trust you've worked so hard to build. If you're looking for more ideas on how to navigate these kinds of changes, head to frontdesk.jane.app and check out the article, How to Tell Clients You're Raising Your Fees. One last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, you can use the code QIOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. I'm using my own experience here to try to grasp what you're talking about here. Again, I grew up with the Greek mythology. To some degree, I have kind of a personal relationship with those characters just because I read so much of them as a young kid. Are there aspects of the pantheon here that you actually take internally? I mean, that you could see in your own actions or your own ways of being in the world that, I don't know, maybe you're in a negotiation and someone's trying to take advantage of you and you feel Shrenu come up, with a big old sword and go, yeah, no. Or maybe you're working with somebody and they need some kind of compassion and you find Guanyin coming in.
The way that I would relate to that is more in a sense that the deities are like this ultimate model of how I aspire to be, the qualities that I aspire to hold in myself. And so I remember as a young person, when I first discovered Guanyin, and again, I discovered Guanyin through first a statue in Beijing, then through a pendant that was gifted to me. So these are all the reasons why we have to manifest deities with some form so that we have a way to meet them and communicate with them, right? And so when I was a young person, Guanyin really was a guide of how to be. And there was a divine feminine aspect that felt very comforting as well. So, Guanyin is teaching us to have compassion and try to relieve suffering of all beings, including ourselves. And that power can be very comforting to us and something to approach. For Zhenwu, I would say Zhenwu, in his iconography and history or hagiography, he shows us that we can have this courage, this stillness under pressure, all of the martial virtues, really. I mean, he's very much an icon for a martial artist to look towards and aspire towards, to have that type of courage, power, ferocity, vitality, to encounter any, for lack of a better word, like force of darkness in our lives. We can approach it with those qualities that we see in the deity. So I might not think of it in moment to moment when it comes up, but I think of it in my life and what I'm cultivating as models. They're like archetypal models.
You can kind of pull that energy as you need it, given whatever situation you're in.
Right. Or that long-term practice is what enables me to encounter hardships or situations. You can draw upon through prayer too, that energy, that energetic. And I mean, so much of the Daoist martial forms is already doing that. It's like already calling out to the Dark Lord of the Northern Heavens, to the 7 stars of the Dipper. Everything in the forms that you're training is already embedded with that prayer for assistance to empower the practitioner with that energy of the warrior and the protector.
Tell me a little more about the training.
Okay, yeah. So my background in martial arts took place in a somewhat traditional context in a Daoist temple in the Wudang Mountains. I had about 3 years training in Wushu and Shaolin Kung Fu in other regions of China prior to meeting Li Shifu at the Five Mortals Temple, but then focused my training in the Wudang art after meeting him. And so trained for roughly a 6-year period on and off in the Wudang arts, including qigong, tai chi, bagua, sword, meditation, Daoist ritual arts, medicine, music, and scripture. And then I continued to practice all of those things upon returning to the States and started teaching them. And that's all continued up until this day.
And I'd like to come back to the talisman piece. Well, the ritual. Actually, let's talk a little bit about ritual because, look, any healing art is going to have its rituals. It could be something as simple as a conventional medicine doctor wearing a stethoscope around their neck. That's kind of an aspect of ritual in that particular medicine tradition, right? Chinese medicine practitioners, I don't know, we wear Birkenstocks or something. It's something, there are things that make us who we are, so to speak. And so I'm curious to know more about the ritual piece that goes with Daoist medicine.
I guess since we were just talking about martial arts, I'm thinking about bagua right now as a ritual art, and then I'll try to tie it into how that might differ from the ritual of writing a talisman. So the Wudang martial arts evolved from Daoist ritual arts. So there's so much of that self-cultivation and healing intermixed with it. So for example, a Wudang form such as the bagua, or what we call the babu chunyang, is a ritual in and of itself in that there's incantations, hand seals, and symbols. So the actual walking pattern is a symbol. So that becomes the ritual. You begin the form with an incantation, which is about making that connection to a divinity or to even like a divine version of the gua, like the Ba Gua, but typically to the Big Dipper or the 7 stars and the North, which we think of as like the circumpolar realm of the immortals. And drawing upon that power, bringing it up into the body, then facing different directions, walking patterns on the ground while also using hand symbols or hand seals, or what we might think of like a mudra, which is also like a celestial language, something that can be seen by the unseen world. And so it's a mix of creating all of that and differentiating the space from just everyday, just being in a normal moment. And then the ritual is like, now we're going to differentiate the space. We're going to use various tools to create a connection or a communication. And then we're going to, execute whatever the purpose is. And so, for example, with a talisman drawing, the ritual would be to light the candle at the altar, light the incense. So now we have kind of this element of fire, and then we have this element of fragrance, which is influencing our mind and our physiology to smell that and see in the smoke. And, it's said that these fragrances can attract. So it's like fragrance, sound. You might ring a bell or knock on the wooden fish. And the sounds are also something that can conjure those frequencies into communication. The incense is like this transformation from form to formless, because you have like the form of the incense stick, then moving into, transforming into smoke, and then ultimately rising up into the celestial sphere. And that would be the opening ritual. You might also do offerings, and then you would speak. You would use the human voice as the communication as well. And there's prescribed things to say. And then you would distill all of that into, let's say, it's a talisman. Does that make sense?
It sounds like you're creating a kind of a sacred space, a receptive space. You're looking to channel particular influences from that unseen realm into our realm. And then you're taking it, and that's kind of a way of condensing, right? You're taking the unformed and you're inviting it into the formed being of a human being that's already beginning to condense things. And then you're taking it further with your intention and your actions, and you're writing it onto a piece of paper. That's bringing it even into an even more condensed form.
Yes, absolutely. And I just remembered, I thought of a great example the other day. My daughter, she's 11, and you know how kids, they'll always put a note on their door that says, keep out, and what the parameters are of who they want to keep out, right? They'll be like, oh, only, so-and-so and so-and-so can come in. You know what I mean with how kids do that? And then I was thinking, that is like this very simple example of how we use language and symbolism to ward off or draw boundaries or invite in, right? And so you may know this, like Chinese New Year, they always replace and make new calligraphy with auspicious words on the doors.
Yeah, we're getting ready for it. Getting the house cleaned up too first.
Yep. A 5th of the 5th, we put up the mugwort to ward off negative kind of external factors that might come in. And so that's like an example of how in everyday living, we actually use symbolism and language to ward off, protect, or invite in auspicious energy. And a talisman is very similar, but for the doorways of the human body. And
human spirit too, I would suspect.
Yeah, absolutely.
First and foremost, I'm a clinician, right? I mean, I do this podcast and, there's that. But first and foremost, I'm a clinician. I'm always looking for, what can I do to somehow be more effective, help my patients better? And I mean, is there like a case study that you could give us or describe a situation in kind of a clinical sense where you've been able to utilize these, I'm going to call multidimensional tools? You got quite a toolkit here. And the kind of changes that you saw arise in somebody who was looking for some help.
For sure. Yeah. So I should say that, as you probably know, I'm not an acupuncturist, and I have no experience in clinical application of these arts. So, but what I have done is, apprentice and assist Li Shifu in talisman healing. So I'll conjure some stories here in a second. But to be honest, with Li Shifu, I was often just sort of witnessing and facilitating, and I was not really authorized or taught more than, let's say, 3 talisman by Li Shifu himself, because there's really strict requirements on learning and practicing them that of all the things that Li Shifu does share with his students, he for sure withholds the talisman writing the most. So, but I witnessed him administer and prescribe talisman to several people, and I can tell you some stories about that in a second. But then more recently, I have been studying, I have had the chance to have access to studying, actually how to draw them, the components, many different talismans and Juyo rituals through Jack Schaefer and Josh Painter of Parting Clouds. And I would say I'm very much still in my study and practice phase of that. And I've only just recently kind of opened back up to administering them, if you will, on people other than just experimenting on myself. So very much, there's not a ton of case studies that I could report to you of myself drawing the talismans and giving them to people. So, for example, witnessing...
You've seen some things with your teacher.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Mm-hmm. So he uses all of the modalities, right? Cupping, moxa, herbs, needling, toina, all of it. But an offering at the altar and an appeal to the celestial realm is almost always integrated into it. So, for example, with the traditional cupping, you would actually write a talisman on prayer paper and use that as the element of burning in the cup. Have you seen that done before?
I have. Yeah, actually, this guy in Taiwan, he did some of that.
Yeah. So that would be one example. And then another example would be, so somebody, let's say, comes to Li Shifu. One example is there was a person who was communicating to Li Shifu through me many years ago who had encountered some black magic, or so he thought, in a Southeast Asian country and had been sick ever since. Nothing had really helped. But that was what he thought of as the cause, and asked Li Shifu for help. And so Li Shifu drew him a talisman on prayer paper. It's kind of like a natural mulberry paper, color yellow, sometimes using natural dye to get that yellow color. And then writing with red ink, sometimes cinnabar is part of it. And then that talisman would get folded up and sent to, let's say, this person in this case. And there was ritual at the altar of proclaiming what was the request, lighting incense and sort of empowering the talisman in that way as well, and then sending it off. And that person followed the procedures to either wear or ingest the talisman and got better. So that's an example. Another example, probably the most impactful example of witnessing Li Shifu heal, was a relative who had cancer. And in this case, he didn't use a talisman, but used music therapy and changing environment. But in some ways, if you have a chance to be in the same room as Li Shifu, a lot of the formless type of healing has to do with just the interaction of the two magnetic fields. And the rest is just sort of an external ritual to solidify that. And so in this case, with the person who had cancer, the tumors did shrink when they went back to the hospital. During the time that this person was at the temple, it wasn't just that formless healing of being in the same kind of magnetic field as the healer, but it was also the music therapy, as well as the change of diet, just eating the vegetarian diet of the temple, being in the landscape. I really feel like landscape is one of the greatest healers as well, right? So this older than us, the mountains are older than us, the temples are older than us. There's a frequency that has built over time in specific locations. And typically temples are built in those kind of powerful places in the mountains. So changing her environment, changing her diet, and every day she was lighting incense, sweeping the floors of the temple, doing these activities I think those were all parts of the healing. And so she did see results in the shrinking of the tumors. Later, what happened, I'm not exactly sure, but I know something in the direction of there was a remission when she went back home. And that may or may not have had to do with, again, going back into old habits of how she was living or the environment she was living in.
That is such a big piece, I think. Anyone that's practiced medicine for any length of time, even just being a human being, observing your own life, it's so easy. It's so incredibly easy to get habituated. We get habituated to a place. We get habituated to what we eat. We get habituated to our habits of mind. And days turn into weeks and the weeks turn into years, and our bodies respond to that stuff.
Well, really quick, I was just going to say, because of that predicament of our habituation, our lifestyle and environment, I personally didn't become a clinical practitioner. My, passion lies in helping people create a different habituation or a different lifestyle, one that is based in having daily movement and exercise and that type of physical therapy through Tai Chi and qigong. And that's really my main area of expertise, is the teaching of those movements, and slowly over time helping people integrate that into their lifestyle for healing and recovery or prevention.
Yeah, of course, that's all powerful stuff. Are there any habits of mind that you help people with, or meditative practices? Any Daoist meditative practices that are helpful?
Absolutely. I think so, because if we can become more aware of our mindscape, what thoughts are habitually looping in our mind, and what the tendencies or themes of those thoughts that then manifest as emotions, and then how that makes us feel in our body. I think meditation in the observation method is key in at first just learning to witness what's happening inside of our own minds, because we might all day be looping on a negative thought and not have the meditative practice to become aware of that. So I think meditation, first step is really learning to be an observer of the mind. And then we can start to see, oh, all day long I was looping on this negative thought. Maybe it was anger or irritation. And then it made me feel tight in my chest. And then if day in and day out, that is the radio station playing, then that slowly over time is going to manifest as a disease. So meditation in that way, first helps us become aware of our thoughts and emotions. And then second, sitting in stillness, if you can get your mind to a place of quietude or what we call emptiness, where that rational mind is no longer firing synapses over and over, thoughts after thought, it quiets down. Then some of the intrinsic functions of the body can kick into gear, and the body can rest and restore, and we can accumulate qi through this state of emptiness, and that's going to assist in our ongoing health. We can also do some ritual components in meditation. For example, we can use sound and vibration in meditation to pacify the organs and thereby pacifying the emotion. We can use visualization to, like, for example, a very simple visualization is to visualize the body filling with light, like a natural healing light. And through doing this, in a way, we are reorienting potentially like our cellular structure, and that can be healing as well. So all these things, can be practiced in meditation.
Having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things you can do as a healthcare practitioner, because a robust business is the ultimate expression of vital qi, and that's the heart of our medicine. I'm Julie Bairdontlock, and I help practitioners grow nourishing, profitable, authentic businesses that embody the generative cycle of Chinese medicine. This isn't about all yang all the time. It's about expanding your own internal capacity, growing collaborative relationships with your patients for ethical patient retention, and marketing as an extension of this medicine, not a necessary evil. You already know that everything is connected in your patients' lives and bodies. The same is true for your business. When we align your systems, your schedule, your pricing, and your offerings with you, we create flow, which means more spaciousness, more impact, and more joy. When you are in the flow, fully resourced in terms of qi, time, and money, your business becomes a source of healing, not just for your patients, but for you. Let's grow something rooted, radiant, and real. Visit lifeflowconsulting.com to learn more.
I've noticed in my clinical work, and I've just noticed in my own life, for that matter, that certain habitual thoughts, often associated with the sense of who I think I am, right? This sense of identity. And it seems in this particular moment, here in the United States in particular, maybe Western Europe as well, there's this incredible, deep focus on identity. It's like, I am this, and because I am this, I have these problems. And to me, it looks like this constant repeated pattern. We're talking about holding on to something, repeating a loop. Well, I'm like this because of that, and so therefore life should be like XYZ. And that seems to me to be the opposite of what you were just talking about in terms of finding a place of stillness and finding a way of sitting quietly with the habitual patterns. Well, you didn't say dissolve, but you talked about having an experience of emptiness around those. I'd love to get your thoughts about this current moment, people doubling down on their identities And is that helpful, or is that actually going to be causing more problems? And if it's causing problems, what do you do about it?
I'm not sure about if there's an emphasis or quickening of it now, or if it's always been. The main problem is our sense of isolation within the self and letting the rational mind always be in the forefront. I think that is the problem of the human predicament in and of itself. Unfortunately, it's very hard to change because that's part of our human nature, is to have that sort of egoic mind or sense of self. And absolutely, we just did a meditation the other day, which is sometimes known as self-inquiry, where you actually turn inward and ask the rational mind. It's like you kind of throw it a bone to chew on, which is just who am I? And then it starts to dissolve and malfunction the brain almost. It's like it just breaks down the scaffolding that the rational mind is built on. And what then emerges, so you basically like keep sifting through these layers of realizing I am actually not my rational mind. And then what surfaces from there is what we might call the spirit mind. And somehow the nature of that spirit mind is completely different in that it naturally has compassion, forgiveness, and a sense of oneness with all things. And if we can maintain that, that's the hard part, is to maintain constancy in that state. We can glimpse it over and over, but if we're unable to find stability in that place, then we're still, kind of just struggling through the human experience. But in those moments where the spirit can come forward and we experience its nature, we suddenly, all of the things that were bothering us fade away. They're still there, but they're distant. They're like a distant voice that is not as impactful and gripping and controlling. And what comes forward is this sense of oneness, timelessness, compassion for other things. And in those moments, I think the body is actually healing itself too. So longer sustained states like that can be beneficial. In meditation too, we can have experiences where we kind of relive and witness past experiences in our life and can process and let go. Yeah, sorry, I forgot what your original question was, but I think absolutely that isolation in our personal identity is part of the whole equation of how we find, habitual negativity and negative thinking, vexing thought, and ultimately the beginning of diseases and discomforts.
Just listening to you describe the character of the spirit mind coming forward, just listening, it's like, yes, right. I just feel my whole body relax, right? The breath deepens. Tensions that I had in my chest or my shoulders that I didn't know I was carrying because, again, habitual. Just, that's just relaxed now. There's just a sense of openness there. It's really fascinating to me how various states of mind have such profound impact on our body and how our thoughts about ourselves, I like the way you describe it, our isolated self. I don't know if I heard it that way before, but, just thinking about that and how all these defenses have to go up around it to protect it, like all the time. And just letting that go changes things, really changes how the body feels.
I think that there are things that encourage that spirit mind to be forward and things that encourage that rational mind to be forward. And so, like, for example, I think things that encourage that rational mind to be forward is a lot of what we find ourselves doing now, which is like living this virtual reality, looking at screens, interacting socially through social media. I think these are all things that definitely keep us in this like kind of logical thinking mind versus spending time out in nature doing simple tasks like, with gardening or something like this. Naturally, that other part of ourselves comes forward where we feel tranquil and relaxed. And I imagine that acupuncture itself gets people pretty quickly into that state of relaxation where they can tap into their spirit.
It profoundly can drop people into that sense of just this right now as it is. It's amazing how well it will do that and how often it will do that. It's nothing short of extraordinary as far as I'm concerned. And of course, meditation, like you say, the way we live our life, inhabiting our simple tasks can also be a gateway.
And it's fascinating how hard it is to achieve that.
Well, it's one of those things, simple but not easy. And, let's face it, the egoic, rational mind is fun. You can do all kinds of things with it. It's entertaining.
Alternatively, it is easy, right? It's the easy thing to fall into somehow.
It takes a little resistance, a little practice of presence to let that other, as you say, spirit mind come forward.
And we have to train it out. We have to cultivate it.
You have to cultivate it. Yeah. We talk about cultivation all the time in this profession. And, there it is again, cultivation, practice. Oh, you mean I don't have it down yet? Well, no, you had it down for a moment, but that was a different moment.
Right. Well, and if you look at, I think a great example is like training animals, like training a dog or training a horse. I mean, the initial training is very important, but there's consistency required after that, right? You have to continue to set those tones, always practicing the training day in and day out to get the behavior that you want. And the mind seems so similar. So we never really can just stop and arrive and sustain. We have to always be practicing.
Yeah. There are times, Lindsey, I'm sitting on a meditation cushion and I feel like I'm training a dog because my mind's kind of going, I got these things to do, but I promised myself 21 minutes. So I'm doing the 21 minutes. I can sit here and fidget or I can sit here quietly, but 21 minutes. And at times I'm literally saying this in my mind, sit, stay. Like I'm training a dog. Like I got a newspaper, I'm going to hit myself on the nose. Stay.
And it's always been that way. And that's why in Daoist lore, we call it the monkey mind or the horse mind or horse intent.
You know what? I don't think it's a monkey mind. I think we are not being fair to monkeys. I really think we're not being fair to monkeys. I know we call it the monkey mind, but it's not. Monkeys don't have the same sense of future and past that we do. I don't think they have the same sense of story that we do. We blame a human mind on the monkeys. I don't think it's a monkey mind. I think we're talking about a human mind here. I think we should own it, own up to it.
Right. For sure. Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's just the part about how monkeys maybe kind of move to and fro and have a lot of energy and they go from this to that, with that kind of like that movement, that quick movement. And then, horses, for example, they have to get all of that energy out before they're ready to join up and harmonize with you. And so in some ways, meditation is a lot like that, where the logical mind is going to run in circles, running until it's so tired that it then comes to a place of stillness and turns and looks at you and is ready to join up.
Yeah. For some reason, I like the idea more of training a horse. Maybe that'd be helpful. Horses always scared me. Maybe I'll think about that.
Because in a sense, it's about that connecting and becoming one with, harmonizing those aspects of ourselves.
All right. Well, I can't believe an hour's gone by already. Crazy, huh? That's what a nice conversation will do to you. Lose track of time. Bends time.
Yeah.
Lindsey, anything else to share with our listeners before we wind it down for today?
No, just, I think just a lot of gratitude for all of the different healing modalities that are out in the world and all the practitioners that are part of your platform here. I just, gratitude for all the people out there working in the healing field. And it's just such an important task to do for others. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the time today.
Yep. Talk to you soon.
Okay, friends, that wraps up today's conversation on Taoist medicine. We've explored influences of the unseen world, from the mysterious role of talismans and incantations to how karma and destiny can play a role in illness. Lindsey shared her unique perspective on how martial arts and qigong aren't just physical practices, they're spiritual tools that help us to harmonize with the celestial realm. One of the more intriguing parts of this conversation for me was how talismans act as tools to create sacred space, an intentional shift in the environment that allows for healing and communication with unseen forces. She explains how talisman writing isn't just about the physical act, but more about transforming space by creating a connection with the celestial realm, which in turn helps to channel specific energies. We also touched on something you probably already know about, that changing your environment, whether by walking in nature or through listening to music, it can shift your health in profound ways. It's a reminder that healing requires us to treat not only the body, but to recognize the unseen forces that are all around us. If there's one thing that I'm walking away with, it's the idea that healing is about creating space. Space in the body, in the spirit, and in our surroundings for something greater to come in. As ever, thanks for listening. Do keep your sense of curiosity close at hand and keep asking those questions that don't have easy answers. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.